The god of silence, the story of Harpocrates, the finger on the lips. Hey there. Tonight we're drifting into a quieter kind of divinity. Not the loud gods of thunder or war, but a softer presence, one shaped by stillness and restraint. This is a story born in the liminal hours, where rivers remember their own beginnings, and meaning is carried in gestures rather than words. And if stories like these help your heart or mind feel a little lighter before sleep, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or leave a gentle comment. Maybe just a soft note of where you're listening from, only if it feels peaceful to you. It's a tale of silence learned early, of secrets kept close, and of a child god whose power was not in what he said, but in what he chose not to speak. So let the noise of the day fade gently away. Settle into the calm around you, and breathe slowly as we step into the ancient world where silence itself was sacred. This is the story of Harpocrates, the god who placed a finger to his lips and quietly asked the world to listen inward. In the hush before dawn, where the Nile's waters lap against eternal stones, a secret stirred. Not with the crash of thunder or the roar of lions, but with the soft press of a finger to tender lips. The world held its breath, as if knowing that to speak would shatter what was coming into being. This was no ordinary birth. It was the quiet forging of a guardian, one who would bind the loose threads of fate with invisible chains of silence. The lands of Egypt lay under a veil of stars, the pyramids standing as silent sentinels to the gods' ancient pacts. Isis, the Great Mother, wandered the reeds of the delta, her form cloaked in shadows that danced like forgotten memories. She had endured the fragmentation of her beloved Osiris, pieced him together from the scattered limbs of betrayal, and now, in the depths of her sorrow and resolve, she carried a child destined to inherit not just the throne of the heavens, but the weight of unspoken truths. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of papyrus and incense, as labour came upon her not in agony, but in a deliberate unfolding, each contraction a measured step toward revelation. As the first light pierced the horizon, the child emerged, small and perfect, his skin glowing with the faint luminescence of divine essence. But what marked him was not a crown or a sceptre. It was the instinctive gesture of his tiny hand, rising to his mouth, one finger sealing his lips in eternal vow. Harpocrates, they would call him, the Greeks in their adoption, twisting the name from Horus the child. Harpocrates, the one who commands silence. Yet in that moment he was nameless, a vessel of pure potential, his eyes wide with the knowledge of things yet to be guarded. The gods gathered in spectral forms around the hidden grove where Isis cradled him. Ra, the sun god, cast a golden glance, but uttered no blessing, for even he sensed the child's domain encroaching upon the noise of creation. Thoth, scribe of destinies, inscribed nothing, his ibis beak closed in deference. Anubis paced the perimeter, his jackal ears twitching at unheard whispers, ensuring no mortal ear could intrude. Isis whispered to her son, her voice a thread of wind through leaves. You shall hold the keys to what must remain locked, my child. In your silence, empires will rise and fall untouched by careless tongues. Days blended into nights as Harpocrates grew, not in leaps of heroic deeds, but in the slow accumulation of quiet observation. The Nile's floods came and receded, mirroring the rhythms of his breath, deep, unhurried, drawing in the secrets of the land. He wandered the temples of Thebes, his small feet padding softly on cool marble, where priests intoned rituals in lowered voices. Here, he learned the power of withholding, how a paused word could amplify meaning, how a held gaze could compel truth without demand. The finger on his lips became his sigil, a reminder to all who beheld him that some knowledge was too sacred for utterance. In the heart of the desert, away from the fertile banks, Harpocrates encountered his first trial of endurance. A sandstorm arose, whipping grains like furious spirits across the dunes. Mortals huddled in fear, their cries swallowed by the gale. But the child, God, stood unmoving, his finger steadfast on his lips. The winds howled secrets of forgotten pharaohs, buried treasures and lost loves, testing his resolve. Would he speak to calm the storm? No, he waited, letting the chaos expend itself against his unyielding calm. When the sands settled, the desert bloomed briefly with hidden oses, as if rewarding his restraint. Isis watched from afar, her heart swelling with the bittersweet pride of a mother who knows her child's path will demand isolation, as years turned like the slow grind of millstones. Harpocrates' presence began to weave into the fabric of the divine order. The gods, in their eternal council, debated the fates of men and realms, their voices echoing through the halls of the dot. But when discord threatened to unravel the cosmos, when Set's jealousy flared anew, or when foreign invaders whispered plots against the throne, Harpocrates would appear, a silent figure in the shadows, his finger raised. No words passed his lips, yet the assembly fell quiet, reminded of the fragility of their pacts. Silence became the mortar holding the heavens intact, a force more binding than any oath sworn aloud. Yet this power came at a cost, one that etched lines of quiet sorrow into his youthful face. Mortals, sensing his aura, sought him in dreams and visions, but pleading for the release of burdens too heavy to voice. A farmer, betrayed by his brother, approached a statue of the child, God in a hidden shrine, tears streaming as he whispered his grief. Harpocrates absorbed it, his finger unmoving, transforming the pain into a sealed vessel within himself. The farmer left lighter, but the god bore the weight, his essence growing denser with each absorbed secret. Endurance was his duty, a ceaseless vigil against the entropy of revelation. In the temples, rituals evolved around him. Priests donned masks of the child with finger to lips, enacting ceremonies of sealing, binding scrolls with wax imprinted by his image, burying amulets in sand to guard against loose tongues. These acts were performed in near total quiet, broken only by the faint rustle of robes or the drip of holy water. Harpocrates observed, his presence a catalyst for deeper devotion, but drawing followers who craved the peace of unspoken communion. One such devotee, a young scribe named Amenhotep, dedicated his life to the god, forsaking speech for vows of silence, finding in muteness a clarity that words had obscured. The lands prospered under this veil of guarded knowledge. Crops grew tall without the blight of rumoured curses. Alliances held firm without the poison of leaked intrigues. But beneath the calm surface, tension simmered. The gods, accustomed to the clamour of worship and war, began to chafe at the growing influence of this silent upstart. Set, ever the rebel, plotted in the undercurrents, his eyes gleaming with the fire of disruption. Why should we bow to a child's whim? He murmured to shadows that listened but did not reply. Harpocrates felt the shift, a subtle vibration in the ether, like the distant rumble before an earthquake. He retreated to the sacred island of Philae, where waterfalls masked all sound, to meditate on the gathering storm. There, amid the mist and stone carvings, he traced patterns in the water with his free hand, symbols of fates intertwined. The finger remained on his lips, a barrier against the temptation to warn, to intervene prematurely. For silence was not absence. It was the space where true power coalesced, waiting for the moment of inevitable release. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the river, a single bird alighted on his shoulder, its song cut short, as if in homage. The god's eyes narrowed, sensing the approach of change, a rebellion brewing in the hearts of immortals, a test of his sacred duty. The air grew heavier, pregnant with unspoken challenges, drawing him inexorably toward the confrontation that would define his eternal role. From the mist-shrouded shores of Philae, Harpocrates descended into the shadowed valleys, where the gods convened, their forms materializing like smoke from unseen fires. The council chamber, carved into the cliffs of the dot's edge, hummed with restrained thunder, Ra's solar disk pulsing faintly, Osiris enthroned in verdant wrappings, Isis at his side with eyes like polished obsidian. Set slouched against a pillar of obsidian, his red, tinged skin flickering with unrest, while Thoth's feathers quivered as if catching whispers from the void. The air thickened with the scent of myrrh and unrest, each deity's breath a measured expulsion, aware that one errant word could ignite the fragile order. Harpocrates entered without fanfare, his bare feet leaving no imprint on the stone. The finger remained pressed to his lips, a golden band of restraint forged by Isis herself, gleaming under the ethereal light. He took his place at the circle's heart, not as equal, but as the unseen fulcrum upon which their words balanced. Set's gaze locked upon him first, a predator sizing the quiet lamb. "Brother," Set began, his voice a low rasp like sand over bronze. The child grows bold in his muteness. Does he judge us now, this keeper of trifles? The assembly shifted, robes whispering accusations, but Harpocrates held still, his eyes tracing the veins of quartz in the floor, veins that mirrored the hidden fractures in divine unity. The rebellion unfurled not in shouts, but in the slow creep of insinuations. Set paced, his shadow elongating to swallow the light, recounting old grievances. Osiris's resurrection, the theft of rightful dominion, the endless cycle of floods that drowned his desert domains. Why bind our truths in this boy's vault? He pressed, gesturing to Harpocrates. Let secrets breathe. Let chaos renew what stagnation kills. Ra inclined his head, the sun disk dimming incrementally, a concession to the weight of eternity's boredom. Thoth scratched a single glyph on his tablet, rebellion, then paused, stylus hovering, awaiting the silent god's invisible command. Harpocrates felt the pull of duty like chains of Nile silt, heavy yet unyielding. He rose, moving through the chamber with the deliberation of a river carving canyon, his free hand extending to touch the council flame at the centre. The fire, fed by offerings of mortal oaths, leaped then stilled, its tongues folding inward as if learning restraint from his touch. No word escaped him. Instead, visions bloomed in the minds of the gathered, empires crumbling under leaked prophecies, lovers parted by whispered betrayals, the cosmos unravelling thread by thread into the abyss. Set recoiled, his plot half formed, but tasting the bitterness of inevitability. Yet rebellion is the spark that tests the forge. That night, as the gods dispersed to their realms, Set summoned shades from the underworld, jackal-headed whispers, serpents coiled with unspoken venom. They infiltrated the mortal temples, urging priests to murmur forbidden rites, to etch revelations on papyrus that would shatter the veiled prosperity. In Thebes, a high priest, once devoted to Harpocrates, felt the itch of disclosure, the hidden weakness in Ra's daily passage, but the fracture in Osiris's reconstructed form. His fingers trembled over the scroll, the god's sigil staring back from the wall, a child with finger sealed, eyes imploring endurance. Harpocrates sensed the breach from Philae's heights, a tremor in the collective silence he guarded. He traversed the night, cloaked in starlight, his form shrinking to that of a wandering boy to evade detection. Along the river's bend, he encountered the corrupted priest, who knelt before a makeshift altar, voice rising in reckless incantation. The god approached, not with force, but with presence, standing motionless as the man's words faltered, caught in the gravity of unspoken consequence. The priest's mouth worked soundlessly, secrets retracting like tides. His body slumping, under the weight returned to him. Harpocrates laid a hand on the man's brow, absorbing the rebellion's seed, his own form flickering with the strain of burgeoning secrets. Dawn broke heavier, the Nile's waters running sluggish, mirroring the god's burdened step. Word spread among the divine, Set's tendrils extended further, coiling toward Greece's distant shores, where mortal sailors carried tales of Egyptian mysteries across the wine, dark sea. The Greeks, ever hungry for foreign power, had glimpsed Harpocrates in dreams, Harpocrates, the child silencing storms, adopted into their pantheon as protector of mysteries. Cults formed in hidden groves of Delos, initiates swearing vows under his image, finger eternal on lips. But Set's agents whispered there too, promising liberation through revelation, tempting the boundary between worlds. In the council's reconvening, tension coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Osiris spoke first, his voice a rumble of fertile earth. The order phrase, "Child, will your silence suffice?" Harpocrates met his father's gaze, the finger unmoving, but his free hand carving symbols in the air. Fate's inexorable weave, duty's blade honned by sacrifice. Isis interceded, her form gliding to shield her son. Yet even she felt the cost die. Each guarded secret etched a deeper isolation into his soul, turning the boy, God, into a monument of forbearance. Set lunged then, not with blade, but with truth half spoken, a revelation of Ra's waning vigour, enough to sow doubt without full destruction. The chamber erupted in spectral winds, deities clutching at unravelling pacts, Harpocrates stood at the epicenter, his body a pillar amid the gale, absorbing the chaos. Slowly, deliberately, he raised both hands now, the sealing finger joined by its twin, doubling the barrier. The wind ceased, secrets resealed, but Set laughed, a hollow echo fading into the stone. You delay, little one, but fate hungers for voice. The god retreated to the desert's heart, where obelisks pierced the sky like frozen warnings. There alone under merciless stars, he enacted his ritual of endurance, kneeling in scalding sands, finger pressed until blood welled, mingling with grains that drank it silently. Visions assailed him, mortals rebelling against their kings, inspired by leaked divine frailties, lovers sacrificing whispers for power, only to lose all. Each he bore, his form aging subtly, lines of quiet resolve creasing his eternal youth. Power was not conquest, he understood in the vigil's depths, but the patient outlasting of entropy's rage. As the sands cooled, a messenger falcon arrived from Greece, bearing an olive branch etched with pleas. Harpocrates, silence our oracler's frenzy, bind the Pythia's tongues before war consumes the seas. The adoption deepened, pulling him across waters toward new duties, where Hellenic gods chafed at Egyptian import. Zeus's thunder grumbled distantly, Apollo's lyre strings snapping in envy of the silent rival. Yet Harpocrates felt the inexorable draw, the rebellion's embers fanning toward a greater conflagration. In the council's aftermath, Set vanished into his red wastes, plotting alliance with foreign deities, his whispers crossing the Mediterranean like invisible currents. Harpocrates rose, tracing the falcon's path westward, his finger a beacon against the rising tide of noise. The cost mounted, each step heavier with absorbed fates, but duty propelled him toward the shores where silence would face its first mortal trial, and the true measure of sacrifice unfold. The falcon's shadow fell long across the Mediterranean, carrying the child, God westward, on wings of borrowed light. Harpocrates rode the currents of air and dream, his small form wrapped in linen, the colour of moonlit sand. Below him the sea stretched restless, its surface a dark mirror, reflecting the fractured constellations above. No ship bore him, no mortal hand guided his passage. Silence itself ferried him across the wine, dark expanse. A vessel without sail or oar, drawn by the quiet pleas of distant initiates. He felt the first touch of Greek soil, before dawn touched the horizon. A subtle shift in the quality of silence. Where Egyptian quiet had been deep and alluvial, heavy with river mud and incense, this new silence was sharper, crystalline, threaded with the salt of sea winds and the dry rustle of olive leaves. The air tasted of pine resin and wild thyme. He descended toward the island of Delos, birthplace of Apollo, where the first shrine to Harpocrates had been raised in secret beneath a sacred palm. The cult had begun small. A handful of sailors who had witnessed the child. God still a storm off the coast of Crete, his finger to lips commanding the wind to hush. They had carried the tale home, and from their whispered vows the shrine grew. Modest, half, hidden among the ruins of older altars, its walls painted with faint images of a boy in Egyptian headdress, finger sealed in gold leaf. Initiates came at night, barefoot, speaking only in gestures. They left offerings of sealed clay tablets, small jars of Nile water, feathers dyed black. Harpocrates moved among them unseen, absorbing their unspoken, fierce fear of oracles that spoke too freely, fear of kings who listened to flattery instead of fate, fear of a world growing loud with ambition. But the rebellion Set had kindled followed him like a long shadow across water. In the groves of Delphi, the Pythia's trance had grown fevered. Her prophecies spilled forth in torrents, no longer veiled in riddle. Kings and generals crowded the temple steps, hungry for every syllable, and each new revelation fed the next war. The balance tilted. Fate, once held steady by measured silence, began to slip through mortal fingers. Harpocrates arrived at the oracle's threshold under a moonless sky. The air thrummed with the residue of spoken destinies, each word a small tear in the fabric of what should remain hidden. He stepped past the sleeping attendants, past the bronze tripods, still warm from the day's fumes, and entered the Editon where the Pythia lay in exhausted sleep upon her laurel bed. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, lips parted as though still tasting prophecy. He knelt beside her. The finger on his lips glowed faintly, casting a soft amber light across her face. Slowly, with the patience of centuries, he reached out and touched the corner of her mouth. No violence, no force, only the lightest pressure, as though sealing an envelope of living parchment. The woman stirred, eyes opening wide with sudden clarity. For the first time in years, her mind was quiet. No voices crowded in, no futures clamoured to be born. She stared at the child, God, tears welling, and understood the gift he offered not speech, but the mercy of silence. Word of the sealed oracle spread slowly, carried on the breath of pilgrims who returned home changed. Some rejoiced, others raged. Kings who had grown accustomed to divine endorsement now found their ambitions checked. Generals paused before battle, uncertain without the Pythia's clear command. In Athens the assembly debated fiercely, should they honour this foreign child? God, who silenced their greatest source of certainty. In Sparta the ephors consulted entrails in secret, seeking signs that the quiet Egyptian import threatened their martial order. Harpocrates did not linger to witness the debates. He moved north through the mountains of Parnassus, then east toward the sanctuary at Eleusis. There, in the torchlit halls of the mysteries, he found a different silence, one cultivated deliberately, reverent, expectant. The initiates, sworn to secrecy, understood the sacredness of what must not be spoken. They recognized in him a kindred guardian. When he appeared among them, small and luminous, they did not speak his name aloud. Instead, they raised a single finger to their own lips in salute. The gesture rippled through the ranks like a wave across still water. Yet even here the rebellion's echo reached. A young initiate, burning with the desire to share the secret knowledge he had glimpsed, felt the temptation grow unbearable. Night after night, he paced the outer precincts, lips trembling with the weight of forbidden truth. One moonless hour, he slipped toward the city walls, determined to speak, to become the herald of revelation. Harpocrates met him on the road. No words passed between them. The god simply stood, small and immovable, finger to lips, eyes steady with ancient sorrow. The youth stopped, chest heaving. For a long moment the two regarded one another, the one who would speak, the one who must not allow it. Then, slowly, the initiate sank to his knees. He pressed his own finger to his mouth, mimicking the gesture not in mockery, but in surrender. Tears traced silent paths down his cheeks. The secret remained sealed. The world turned on, undisturbed. Dawn found Harpocrates at the edge of the sea again, but gazing toward the distant horizon where Egypt and Greece met in myth and memory. The finger had not wavered, yet each ceiling left its mark faint lines at the corners of his eyes, a deeper stillness in his posture, the slow accumulation of burdens no one else could carry. Behind him, the rebellion stirred anew. In the underworld, Set smiled into the darkness, knowing that every silence one was also a wound opened. The child, God felt the next wave coming, heavier than the last, and turned his face toward the rising sun, ready to meet it. The sun rose over the Acropolis, pale and hesitant, as though uncertain whether to illuminate or conceal. Harpocrates walked the sacred way upward, a child among marble giants, his linen garment brushing the dust of centuries. Pilgrims passed him without seeing, tourists now, not initiates, speaking in many tongues, their voices bright and careless. The old silence had thinned here, worn away by time and the clamour of new empires. Yet in hidden corners, beneath the Parthenon's shadow, small altars still stoodly modest slabs of stone, bearing only the image of a finger pressed to childish lips. He paused before one such shrine, half overgrown with wild caper. Someone had left a single olive branch, its leaves silvered with dew. Harpocrates touched the branch. The leaves trembled once, then stilled. In that moment he understood the depth of his adoption. The Greeks had not merely borrowed his name, they had reshaped him. Harpocrates, they called him now, the diminutive form softening the edges of the Egyptian child, God, making him smaller, more approachable, a gentle deity of secrets rather than the stern guardian of cosmic order. They had dressed him in their own myths, given him wings of Hermes, and placed him beside the Muses as keeper of unspoken inspiration. And with each new layer of story, the original weight grew heavier to carry. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even Athens slept, he descended into the underground chambers of the Areopagus. There, beneath the hill of judgment, older rites still lingered, secret societies that met by lamplight, swearing oaths sealed with blood and silence. They recognized him instantly. One elder, face scarred by years and discipline, rose and placed a finger to his own lips in the ancient gesture. The others followed. No words were spoken. Harpocrates moved among them, touching each forehead in turn. With every contact, he drew out a fragment of their hidden burdens. A senator's knowledge of treason, a philosopher's doubt about the gods, a soldier's memory of unnecessary slaughter. Each fragment entered him, lodging like shards of obsidian beneath skin. The burden was changing him. His limbs, once light as river mist, now moved with the gravity of accumulated silences. His eyes, once wide with innocent wonder, held the depth of wells that had drunk too many secrets. Yet he did not falter. Duty was not a choice. It was the shape his existence had taken. Word of the sealed Pythia had spread far beyond Greece. In Rome, senators whispered of an Eastern child, God who could quiet even the voice of Apollo. They sent emissaries, quiet men in grey cloaks, bearing gifts of gold and promises of new temples. Harpocrates met them on the cliffs of Capri, where the sea crashed below like the laughter of forgotten gods. They offered him a place among their pantheon. Harpocrates, god of silence, protector of state secrets, companion to the Vestal virgins, who guarded the sacred flame with wordless vigil, he accepted nothing aloud. Instead he raised his finger once, slowly, and the men fell silent mid-sentence. They left changed. Lighter, yet somehow diminished, carrying back to Rome the understanding that silence was not weakness, but a force that could bind empires more surely than any law. But Set had not been idle. From the red deserts he reached across time and water, threading his influence through the dreams of mortal priests. In the new temples rising along the Tiber, strange rites began to appear. Ceremonies in which initiates were encouraged to speak their inmost thoughts aloud, to purge secrets as though they were poisons. The movement grew quietly at first, then with increasing fervour. Philosophers praised the liberation of the tongue. Poets sang of truth as freedom. The finger on lips' symbol was quietly defaced, replaced with open hands and blooming mouths. Harpocrates felt each desecration like a small wound. He travelled south to Pompeii, where a lavish villa had been dedicated to the new cult of revelation. Inside, frescoes showed a child, God with finger removed from lips, mouth open in ecstatic song. He stood before the largest painting, small and luminous in the torchlight. The household slaves, sensing something beyond mortal sight, drew back. The master of the house entered, wine cup in hand, laughing at some jest. Then he saw the god. For one heartbeat the room held perfect stillness. The man's laughter died in his throat. Harpocrates stepped forward, finger steady on his lips, eyes sorrowful and unblinking. Slowly the master sank to his knees. He reached up, trembling, and pressed his own finger against his mouth. Tears ran down his face. The fresco behind him seemed to fade, colours leaching away as though ashamed. Outside, Vesuvius rumbled softly, a warning, not yet a promise. Dawn found Harpocrates on the road to Rome again, walking alone. Behind him the villa stood quiet, its new rites abandoned, its master sworn to silence for the remainder of his days. Ahead lay the greater city, its 7 hills loud with ambition, its forums ringing with oratory. The rebellion had taken root there, deeper than anywhere else. Senators plotted in open daylight now. Whispers had become proclamations. He felt the next wave approaching, vast and inevitable. The finger on his lips had never wavered, yet each sealing cost more. His form had begun to thin, edges blurring where the absorbed secrets pressed outward, seeking release. Endurance was no longer enough. Sacrifice would soon be required. In the distance, the Tiber gleamed like a silver blade under the rising sun. Harpocrates walked toward it, small, determined, carrying the weight of 2 worlds and the silence that bound them both. Rome received him without ceremony. The Tiber flowed low that autumn, its surface dull as old bronze, carrying silt from distant mountains. Harpocrates walked the Suburra at twilight, a small figure among tall tenements that leaned toward one another, like conspirators. Laundry hung in long silent banners overhead. Children paused their games to watch the boy who did not speak, but whose finger never left his lips. They sensed something older than the city itself had settled among them. He found the first new temple on the Aventine, tucked behind a row of cypress. It was modest, white marble still fresh, the scent of cut stone lingering, but already the air inside felt wrong. Voices rose freely here. Initiates gathered in small circles, encouraged to confess hidden thoughts, to name fears and desires aloud, as though speaking them dissolved their power. A young woman stood at the centre, eyes bright with fevered relief, recounting a betrayal she had carried for 7 years. The listeners nodded, murmuring approval. Each word released into the room felt, to Harpocrates, like a thread pulled from the great tapestry he had spent centuries weaving. He stepped into the lamplight. The circle fell quiet, not from fear, but from a sudden inability to continue. Mouths opened, then closed. Tongues lay still in their owners' mouths. The young woman's confession hung unfinished, suspended between utterance and silence. She looked at the child, God, and understood instantly what she had broken. Slowly she raised her hand, pressed one finger to her own lips, and bowed her head. One by one the others followed. The temple emptied without another word spoken. The lamps guttered lower, as though ashamed. But the movement was larger than one building. Across the city, in forums and baths, in the shadowed colonnades of private villas, the cult of open speech spread like damp rot. Philosophers debated the virtue of candour. Poets composed odes to the beauty of revelation. Politicians learned to wield half-truths with theatrical precision. The Senate chamber rang with voices that once would have been restrained by shame or fear. Secrets once guarded as sacred currency now became bargaining chips, traded openly for favour and power. Harpocrates moved through these spaces like a ghost. He stood at the back of assemblies, small and unnoticed, finger steady. But each time a dangerous truth was spoken aloud, each time a plot was named, a weakness confessed. A prophecy uttered without veil, he stepped closer. He did not interrupt. He simply waited until the speaker's eyes met his. Then the words faltered. The speaker's hand rose, trembling, to their own mouth. The gesture spread like a slow tide through the crowd. One by one they sealed themselves. The chamber grew quieter with every meeting, the air thicker, heavier with things that refused to be born into sound. Yet every sealing cost him. The absorbed words and half-spoken fates no longer simply lodged within him. They pressed outward, straining against the boundaries of his form. His skin grew faintly translucent, as though light passed through something thinning. His steps, once light, now carried the weight of centuries of unspoken grief. At night, when the city finally slept, he retreated to the Janiculum hill and stood beneath the stars, letting the wind move through him. Sometimes small cracks of light appeared at the corners of his eyes, the seams of his fingers, places where the pressure of contained secrets sought release. One midnight he found Set waiting, not in visible form, but as a long shadow thrown across the Tiber's surface by no earthly light. The shadow spoke without voice, vibrations rippling through water. You delay the inevitable, child. Every silence you enforce only stores greater violence for later. Let them speak. Let the world burn clean. Harpocrates did not answer. He simply raised his free hand and drew a slow circle in the air. The shadow writhed, then dissolved. But the words remained, echoing inside him, joining the countless others he carried. The next morning Vesuvius spoke. Not in eruption, not yet, but in a low, grinding rumble felt across the bay. Pompeii trembled. People paused in the streets, looked toward the mountain, then shrugged and continued their day. They had grown accustomed to warnings they refused to hear. Harpocrates stood at the city gate, watching families pass beneath the arch, laughing, arguing, planning. He felt the coming fire the way a mother feels the kick of an unborn child, certain, unstoppable, heavy with both love and sorrow. He could not speak the warning. He could only stand finger to lips, bearing witness to what must come, because mortals had chosen noise over restraint. A small girl, no older than 7, stopped before him. She studied his face, then lifted her own small finger to her mouth, copying the gesture perfectly. She did not smile. She simply held the pose for a long moment, then turned and ran back to her mother. Harpocrates watched her go. For the first time in centuries, something cracked inside him, not a secret escaping, but the faintest beginning of grief. Not for himself, for them. For the children who would inherit a world that had forgotten how to be quiet. Behind the city, the mountain smoked quietly, patient. Ahead lay Rome, still loud, still hungry for certainty it could not bear. The child, God turned toward the Forum once more, carrying the unbearable weight of what he must continue to hold, knowing the next ceiling would cost more than he had left to give. Rome's winter came thin and bitter that year. Frost traced the aqueducts like silver veins. The Forum lay empty at dawn, its marble still holding the echoes of yesterday's orations. Harpocrates moved through the half, light. A child wrapped in shadow and linen, his steps measured against the cold stone. Each breath he drew carried the taste of smoke. From 1,000 household braziers, small fires burning secrets no one dared name aloud anymore. The city had changed in subtle, irreversible ways. Speeches in the Senate grew shorter, more careful. Men who once thundered now paused, glanced toward the corners of the chamber, as though expecting a small figure to appear. The cult of open revelation withered under its own excess. Confessions, once offered freely, now felt dangerous, exposed. People began to remember the old virtue of restraint, not because they feared gods, but because they feared what happened when every thought was permitted to breathe. Yet the cost was carving itself into Harpocrates' very being. His form, once luminous and whole, now showed faint fissures, hairline cracks of pale light along the knuckles, the throat, the temples. Wherever secrets pressed hardest, the skin parted, not bleeding, but glowing with the muted radiance of withheld stars. He could feel them moving inside him. The unspoken treason of a consul, the buried grief of a widow, the prophecy a sibyl had swallowed rather than speak. Each one weighed more than the last. Endurance had become a slow breaking. He sought refuge in the temple of Vesta. The eternal flame burned low and steady behind its bronze grill. The 6 virgins moved in perfect silence, but tending the fire with gestures so practiced they seemed part of the ritual itself. When Harpocrates entered, they did not startle. One by one they turned, raised a finger to their lips, and bowed. He took his place beside the hearth, small and luminous against the dark stone. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to sit, to rest the finger on his lips with something like relief. The eldest Vestal approached. She carried no offering, only her own silence. She knelt before him and placed both hands over her heart, then slowly lifted one finger to her mouth. It was not mimicry. It was recognition. She had guarded flame and secret for 40 years. She understood the toll of never speaking what one knows. In her eyes, Harpocrates saw mirrored his own quiet sorrow, the understanding that some duties do not end, they only deepen until the vessel cracks. Outside, the city stirred. Messengers arrived from the east bearing word of Vesuvius. The mountain had begun to speak in earnest. Columns of ash rising by day, red glow staining the sky by night. Pompeii and Herculaneum lay under a soft grey snow that burned the lungs. Those who fled carried tales of the sky darkening at noon, of statues weeping molten stone. Yet even now, but few connected the disaster to the loosening of silence. They blamed the mountain, the gods, fate. They did not look inward, to the years of reckless speech that had frayed the delicate order Harpocrates had laboured to maintain. He rose from the hearth and left the temple without farewell. The virgins watched him go, fingers still pressed to lips, eyes bright with unshed tears. They understood what he carried away with him, not only their secrets, but the knowledge that even perfect vigilance has a limit. He walked south along the Via Appia. Tomes lined the road like silent sentinels, their inscriptions worn smooth by time and wind. Cypress trees stood tall and dark, mourning in the old Roman fashion. Harpocrates moved among them, pausing at each major sepulchre to lay a hand on cold stone. With every touch another burden entered him. The last words a father never spoke to his son, the treason a wife carried to her grave, the prophecy of empire's fall that a soothsayer had sealed behind her teeth. The cracks in his form widened. Light leaked now in thin, steady streams, tracing the shape of ribs, the curve of shoulder, the line of jaw. At the tomb of the Scipios he stopped. There, beneath the earth, lay generations of generals and statesmen who had known when to speak and when to be silent. Harpocrates knelt in the doorway, a finger firm against his lips, and let the accumulated weight settle. The glow within him pulsed once, twice, bright enough that the cypress shadows danced backward. Then came the sound he had dreaded for centuries. A low, resonant crack, not from the mountain far away, but from inside his own chest. The light flared outward in a single blinding pulse, then dimmed again. He staggered, small hands clutching at the stone. For the first time the finger slipped. Just a fraction, just enough for one breath to escape. It was not a word. It was a sigh, soft, ancient, infinitely weary. The sound travelled outward like a ripple across still water. Somewhere in the city a senator paused mid-sentence. In a villa on the Palatine a poet set down his stylus. In the harbour at Ostia a sailor looked up from his nets. suddenly aware of how loudly the world had been shouting. Harpocrates pressed the finger back into place, harder this time. The crack sealed, but not perfectly. A thin seam of light remained along his breastbone, a scar that would never fully close. He stood again. Behind him the tombs watched in silence. Ahead lay the road to the sea, to the cities already half buried, to the mountain that would soon finish what reckless tongues had begun. The child, God walked on, smaller now. Lighter in one sense, infinitely heavier in another. The sigh had changed something. Not the world, not yet. But the boundary between what must be held and what must be released had grown thinner, and the mountain waited. The road to the bay wound through fields gone grey with ash. Snow that was not snow fell in soft, choking drifts. Harpocrates walked alone, small footprints, filling almost as soon as they were made. The air tasted of sulphur and silence, the kind of silence that comes after every possible word has been spoken and found wanting. Pompeii appeared through the haze like a dream half, remembered. Walls still stood, painted in bright reds and yellows, though the colours had already begun to dull under the falling veil. Streets lay empty save for the occasional figure hurrying home, cloth pressed to mouth. Dogs barked once, then fell quiet. Even the fountains had ceased their music, water no longer ran. The mountain loomed behind the city, its cone blackened, its summit glowing with the patient red of a forge left untended too long. Harpocrates entered through the Stabian gate. No one saw him. No one needed to. He passed bakeries where loaves sat cooling in their ovens, past thermopolia with wine still warm in clay jars, past houses where children had been called inside and doors bolted against the strange weather. The city held its breath. It knew, in the way bodies know before minds admit, that something final approached. He came at last to the small shrine near the Forum. It had been built only a few decades earlier, when the first rumours of the child God reached Campania. A modest cellar of tufa stone, its pediment carved, with a single figure boy, finger to lips, eyes looking neither forward nor back, but inward. The paint had faded, the gold leaf that once rimmed the sealing finger had worn to a dull bronze. Yet someone still tended it. A fresh olive branch lay at the base, its leaves trembling in the ash-laden wind. Harpocrates stepped inside. The space was barely larger than his outstretched arms. A single lamp burned on a ledge, its flame steady despite the draughts that should have extinguished it. He knelt before his own image. For a long moment he studied the carved face, so like his own, yet untouched by the centuries of bearing. The statue's finger was perfect, uncracked, unscarred. Outside, the mountain spoke again. A deep, grinding roar rolled down the slopes. Windows rattled. Somewhere a roof tile slid and shattered on stone. People began to run, not yet in panic, but with the hurried purpose of those who still believe they can outpace fate. Inside the shrine, Harpocrates raised both hands. The left remained pressed to his lips, unbroken habit, final vow. With the right he reached forward and touched the statue's carved finger. Light flowed between them, thin and silver, like moonlight on water. Slowly, carefully, he drew the accumulated weight out of himself and into the stone. Every unspoken plot, every swallowed grief, every prophecy choked back, every secret that had once threatened to tear the world apart, he poured them into the image. The statue glowed, not brightly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of something returning to its proper place. The cracks in Harpocrates' own form began to close. The light that had leaked from his chest, his knuckles, his temples, but dimmed and drew inward. His skin took on again the soft, living opacity of a child. The weight lifted, not gone, never gone, but held now where it belonged in the eternal, unchanging silence of stone. The mountain roared a second time, louder. Ash thickened to a grey curtain. The sky disappeared. People screamed now. Real terror breaking through the surface of composure. Feet pounded past the shrine, voices calling names, hands clutching children. Harpocrates remained kneeling. He had done what he could. The rest belonged to time and consequence. A final tremor shook the city. The lamp flickered once, twice, then held. In that small, perfect stillness, Harpocrates lowered his right hand. He looked up at the statue, one last time, and saw that its carved eyes had softened, as though the stone itself had learned compassion. Then he rose. He stepped out into the storm of ash and darkness. No one saw the small boy walk through the streets as the sky turned to night at noon. No one saw him pass the city gates and continue south toward the sea. No one saw him pause at the water's edge, where waves hissed against black sand, and raise one finger, not to his lips this time, but to the sky, a final quiet salute to what must be endured. Behind him, Vesuvius opened. Fire and stone poured down the mountain in rivers of liquid night. Pompeii vanished beneath the flood, streets, houses, temples, people, all sealed in a single catastrophic instant. The world roared, then slowly, slowly fell still. Centuries passed in that stillness. The shrine lay buried. The statue waited beneath meters of ash, but finger forever pressed to lips, holding the last great silence of a city that had spoken too much and too carelessly. And somewhere, far away, a child god walked on, lighter now, but never free. The duty remained. The finger remained. The quiet power remained. One last burden had found its place. The rest waited, patient as stone, for the next age that would need guarding. Time folded itself over the buried cities like a heavy cloak. Centuries drifted across the ash, soft and relentless. Rain came, then sun, then rain again. Grass found cracks in the stone streets. Trees grew tall where once rooftops had been. The mountain slept, its anger spent, its lesson sealed beneath meters of hardened silence. Somewhere beneath what had become vineyard and olive grove, the small shrine waited. No one remembered its name. Farmers turned the soil above it without knowing what lay below. Children chased one another across fields that had once been forums. Only the earth itself remembered a faint, persistent stillness that made birds fall quiet when they passed overhead, that caused dogs to lower their heads and walk more softly. One winter morning, long after empires had risen and crumbled on distant shores, a boy found the place. He was perhaps 10, dark-haired, barefoot, carrying a stick he used to draw shapes in the frost. He had come looking for lost sheep, and instead found a depression in the ground, where the frost had melted first, as though something beneath still breathed warmth. Curiosity drew him closer. He scraped away soil with his hands until smooth stone appeared. Then more a carved face, small, perfect, one finger forever pressed to childish lips. The boy sat back on his heels. He stared for a long time. The statue stared back, unchanged, unweathered, its eyes seeming to follow him with gentle patience. Something in the boy's chest loosened, the way a knot untees itself when no one is watching. Without thinking, without knowing why, he lifted his own small finger and touched it to his mouth. The gesture felt older than he was. It felt like something he had done before, in another life, in another world. For one heartbeat, the air around him grew perfectly still. No wind, no bird, no distant cartwheel on the road. Only the two of them, boy and stone boy, each sealing the same vow across millennia. Then the moment passed. A breeze returned. Somewhere a sheep bleated. The boy smiled, small and private, and carefully covered the statue again with soil, leaving only the faintest mound to mark its place. He stood, brushed dirt from his knees, and walked away, humming softly. He would never speak of what he found. He would never need to. Above ground, the world continued its noisy turning. Cities rose again, louder than before. Voices filled every corner, markets, temples, screens, skies. Secrets were traded like currency, spilled like water, hunted like game. Yet, even in the loudest ages, quiet corners persisted: libraries at midnight, sick rooms at dawn, the pause between lovers before the first kiss, the moment after great grief, when no word is possible. In each of those spaces, something of Harpocrates remained, not as myth, not as statue, but as the instinct that sometimes makes a hand rise, unbidden, to cover the mouth. That causes eyes to meet and understand everything without a syllable. That teaches the wisest hearts that some things are too vast, too sacred, too fragile to be given voice. He had not disappeared. He had become the pause itself, the breath held, the word swallowed, the truth carried in silence across centuries. Wherever someone chooses restraint over release, endurance over explosion, love over confession, duty over desire, the child, God is there, small and luminous, finger steady on lips. And so the story ends not with thunder, nor with fire, nor with proclamation. It ends with the soft sound of soil settling over stone, with the slow closing of a door no one saw open, with the quiet that remains when everything that could be said has been said, and the only thing left is to listen. Somewhere, always a finger rests against tender lips, not in defeat, not in fear, but in the patient, eternal knowledge that some powers are strongest when they refuse to speak, and the world, noisy and fragile and beautiful, turns on, held together, moment by moment, by the mercy of what is never said. Good night,